Okay, we are going to dive right into the conversations, and basically, it's what we are gathered here for today. So, the first session on the agenda, I believe we all have the agenda, is the digital and data rights. Does the private sector have a role? And this session will focus on the private sector actors and the role they play in the impacts of digital rights. It will also highlight the UNGP business and human rights standards, and the panel will discuss how much of this is being upheld within the sector. And this session is going to be moderated by Sani Suleiman. Sani is a programs assistant at Paradigm Initiative with a focus on business and human rights. Sani, you're welcome.
All right. Good morning once again. Already, I have been introduced already. My name is Sani Suleiman Sani. Work with Paradigm Initiative. The first session is role of private sector protecting digital and data rights, and I'll be joined with I'll be joined by three panelists. First, I would like to invite Ridwan Oloyede from Tech Hive Advisory. And also Moyo Oluwasegun from Global Rights. And also we do have Dr. Ololade Shilon from Meta, who will be joining us virtually. And she's here with us already. You are welcome, Doctor. We'll also try to look at the emerging trends that we need to keep our eyes on and be thinking about trends related to data rights or data abuse, and also holding the companies accountable in terms of their responsibilities towards human rights. So, and also to mention that this session is looking to fulfill three objectives, which are first, increase discourse around the role of the private sector in advancing digital and data rights. Second, to increase call for accountability on privacy, digital and data rights for the private sector. And the last one is to increase awareness on the United Nations guiding principles and the standards on business and human rights. But before we dive into the panel discussion, I would like to quickly run through the session format. 75 minutes were earmarked for this session. The first 5 minutes, we will use it for introduction, and then 45 minutes for the panel discussion, and the last 25 minutes for Q&A, where we will open up the floor for you, the participants, to ask questions related to the topic of discussion. That sounds good, right? Great. But I don't know, please take support. Can you confirm if Dr. Ololade is with us? And she can let her say hi so that we can. Hello, Doctor.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
we can start the panel discussion. And like I said, later on, we'll be joined by yeah. So I will start with you, Read One. As a researcher, you have worked intensively on uh, issue of data privacy protection in Nigeria. And so, what have you found? What have you found to be in terms of compliance, Nigerian data protection?
Yeah, thanks, Sonny. Again, my name is Redon Obede. I lead the policy team at African Ministry. I'm also listed as an expert at the Data Protection Unit of the Council of Europe. And yeah, that's a quick introduction about what I do currently. Okay, so to answer the question, so the first thing is you need to first look at what is the motivation itself for why a business should, comply with data protection rules if they exist in the first place, or why are businesses increasingly these days paying attention to, or why are businesses these days increasingly paying attention to data protection concerns? Why has it become so much of a big buzzword, and it's stirring up conversation in different parts of the world? So I mean, there are a few issues you can point to, and I'm going to make it really Nigerian centric. So if you look at what we had in the last 2 decades thereabouts, we've seen a whole lot of technological advancement, technological adoption. We've seen also proliferation of internet-enabled devices. If you look at the number of people who had smartphone in early 2000s, or let me say 2010, if you look at that now to this particular period, you see a geometric increase in the number of smartphone users, but more importantly also the use of internet-enabled devices. And what I also mean is that you also look at the number of digital services that we have. In 2010, the way we talk about fintech, the way we talk about digital health startups these days, we don't have that kind of conversation. We're not having that kind of conversation. At best, what you had was your bank where you could probably use your ATM. I mean, even the mobile bank app wasn't so popular then. So, now look at this now. So, which means we have startup solutions, digital service providers springing up in different parts of the country, providing different services, leveraging personal data of people. And of course, we can always talk about the convenience this product means, whether you want to access cash quickly, whether you need to send money quickly, whether you need to transfer money outside of the country, whether you need to reach out to people, whether you need to communicate, whether you need to learn, whether it's a massive online open platform to take educational courses, whatever it is, whatever the benefit the services is provided itself. So, in our own research, whether doing technical analysis, sector by sector review of organizations, or whether it's doing a regulatory impact assessment to look at how, companies, government institutions have been able to, comply with rules and, some sort of obligations that they have on them, is that there is a stark contrast. So first, and I'll try and break it into 3. First, you have companies, let's say internet, maybe more than 3 classes. Let me just say 4 or 5 categorization. So first, you have the global companies. When I say global companies, I'm talking about companies who have more representation, or their digital services or whatever service they provide cuts across more than just a country. So you have them who they've been influenced by laws in countries where they come from, standards or certification mechanism where they come from, that gives them incentive to actually build these controls into the tools that they provide, which means by extension, they extend this goodwill. And I will call it goodwill, because for a long time, there wasn't any law. Currently, well, appears to be like a law itself, but there's a whole lot of issues around what's the strength of the law, what's the independence of the agency enforcing the law, how have they even, since the law itself came into being, what's the sources that the law itself has recorded? Has it birthed that cultural shift, that corporate change to make people, be more digitally responsible? And you have to answer. I mean, those are questions you may want to answer yourself. So you have a company like that their motivation to, extend this goodwill is the laws, the laws in countries where they come from, or in some countries where they operate. Then you have the ones who are maybe local owned businesses, who because they do business with external business, they are compelled, or maybe because as part of a funding round or a grant they are getting, it's a condition that they should build controls into place. And there you have fully Nigerian-based businesses, jump on buzzwords, but on jump trends. You see a whole lot of things happening around facial recognition these days, AI, machine learning, different models being developed and tools, but then ignoring safeguards. So you have a genre of storm of them like that whose focus around compliance is merely box ticking. Oh, there's a requirement to file an audit. Oh, let's file the report, and that's it. Not genuine commitment to that cultural shift, to actually embed it into the product, embed it into the organization, make it part of how people do their job within the organization. So on the other spectrum, you then have government institutions who are government institutions. So basically, mainly that. And so the recurring trend we've seen is some try, some don't try, some don't care. Some try to, but still below par, because at the end of the day, when we humanize the conversation and we call personal data, we say human beings. You realize there are people who are either beneficiary of whatever it is that is being done, or there are people who, as a result of ignoring safeguards, not building these controls into place, become targets, become victims, are excluded, suffer harm, suffer damages, are discriminated against, are excluded from social services or benefits. So for me, that's just like an environmental scan of what we've seen so far, what the trend has been so far. And of course, we're having this conversation because we need to have that difficult conversation where we need to go from where we are right now to a different place. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much, Ridwan. Thanks for laying the foundation for that we can build on for this discussion. And I found it very interesting when you raised the issue of multinational companies that had to cope with multiple regulations and things like that. That's a loophole that we can look into. And so let me come to Moyu. Your organization, Global Rights, has been at the forefront, and if I'm right, lead the process of drafting the National Action Plan on Human Rights. So business and human rights. Sorry. Yeah. So I would like to know. I and the participants would like to know what are the provisions in this draft, and how do you think, when adopted, it's going to change the narrative in terms of compliance by the companies and respecting human rights.
Thanks a lot, Sani. So my name is Moyo, and I work with Global Rights. And the work we do essentially is around human rights, natural resource governance, policy, but human rights remains the centerpiece of the work that we do. And in drafting the National Action Plan for Business and Human Rights, one of the things that informed this draft was essentially to make it a derivative of the UNGP, that's the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. So there's not a lot of deviation from what you have in the UNGP. It's just more contextualizing within the within the Nigerian situation, essentially. And so there are three main prongs of the UNGP, which are also the three main prongs of the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights. And the first is, in fact, there's an acronym for it really. There's protect, there's respect, and there's remedy. So protect there stands for the government's responsibility, and that's an existing responsibility really when you think about it, to protect the human rights of citizens. So that's to protect the citizens from abuse and to ensure that citizens at all times have their rights respected. So the idea there is to then trickle this protection for human rights down to businesses and to ensure that within the corporate environment, now you have respect, which is then the on the part of the businesses, their own commitment to respecting human rights. And that is essentially to say that they have to do the work, to put policies in place, to put structures in place, and to put mechanisms in place that ensure that there are no human rights abuses happening under their watch, and that if there is such happening, there are mechanisms to ensure that the affected parties will be able to seek redress. But beyond that, that when such human rights abuses happen within the organization or under the watch of the organization, there are steps that the organization can then take to review its processes to say that, all right, this has happened. How do we ensure that going forward, such an abuse does not happen in the future? And then there's a third part, which is the remedy. And that's essentially the idea of access to remedy, that's justice. So, what mechanisms are available for people who feel like their rights have been violated in the business environment? And then you talk about, I think there are three sub prongs under that. There is the state-based access to justice mechanisms. There are non-state-based justice mechanisms. Apologies, access to is a word that we use a lot in the work that we do, in the work that I do. And there's a third one which doesn't readily come to mind. But essentially, the idea here is that you want to ensure that through this document, that's the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights, the state itself, which is the Nigerian government, is held responsible and understands that there is a responsibility on their part to protect their citizens in the business environment, that whatever businesses are established within Nigeria also understand that they have a responsibility to their employees, to their workers, to respect their human rights, and that in the event of the abuse of these human rights, it is easy for the victims to seek redress. Now, one of the things that is important to note is that with the National Action Plan, which is the Nigerian Action Plan on Business and Human Rights, in the context of Nigeria, in the research work done essentially to come up with this document, some EU countries were studied, and what you have over in the EU is that they're multinational corporations, and so the direction of their national action plans essentially are towards multinational corporations operating in other countries, which is to say that the action plans are designed to ensure that when these multinationals operate in other country, their business practices are in line with best practices for human rights, so that they don't do anything that brings embarrassment to the country, because there are oftentimes government vested interest in some of these companies, in some of these multinationals. What we have in Nigeria, however, is a different situation where we don't have that many multinationals. So the design of the NAPBHR, which is the short form for National Action Plan for Business and Human Rights, essentially is done in such a way that it focuses on corporations that are, well, we have a couple of multinationals, so that as well as other multinationals operating within the Nigerian environment. And these three guiding principles that I've mentioned are some of the things that the National Action Plan takes into consideration. Now, how do you then tie this into to technology, to data rights and protection? I think that's where the real work comes in, because what we have right now is a broad-based document that, if it receives the federal approval, it should be able to cater to businesses at all levels, regardless of whether it's in the tech sector or it's in any other industry. However, what needs to happen is that there needs to be specific work done to address human rights within the context of digital rights. And that's an emerging conversation now, the conversation about whether digital rights actually are human rights. So that work needs to be done. There needs to be the establishment of communities of practice and bodies of knowledge to look into data privacy and protection laws within Nigeria. Because one of the things that we're lacking in at the moment is those regulations that ensure that people's rights online are protected. And I think Nigeria is one of the countries that perhaps there's not a lot of regulation around that, and whatever regulation there is at the moment is wrongly focused. So I think I'm deviating because I wanted to go into talking about how the focus at the moment has been sort of draconian laws that look to limit the rights of citizens. And I mean, an example that readily comes to mind is the Twitter ban. However, that's an entirely different conversation. But just to say that that we need to refocus our priorities as a country towards looking into how do we ensure that there are proper data protection laws in place and that the data rights and privacy of our citizens are guaranteed to ensure that human rights abuses are not taking place in the digital space. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. You did justice to the question, and I'm glad you made mention. You have made mention of United Nations Guiding Principles, and I wanted to add that this is a publicly available document that everyone has to. You can search on the internet and read them, and especially the UNGP, which serves at the yardstick for other documents and regulation, clearly states that states what the responsibilities of the state is, what the responsibilities of this company are. So I encourage everyone to do that. And like you said, you were trying to deviate from the conversation, but I'm coming back to that. I will give you a chance to. So I think we are nicely passing into the other panelist, which is Dr. Ololade from Meta, formerly known as Facebook. No, we are encouraged to be reminding people that Meta is Facebook. Yeah. So Doctor, if you can hear me, I would like to ask a question, specifically looking at the fact that Ridwan made mention of the multinational companies, and Facebook or Meta is one of the largest players we have in the tech sector. And when it comes to social media, they have they own some of the largest social media platforms. So I would like to ask, what are the policies or I will use the word policy and framework around collection, usage, sharing, and processing of data. What is Meta's policy around that? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sunny. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So I don't know if I'm supposed to introduce myself again. I'll just do that quickly. My name is Ololade Shilon. And of course, I work for Meta and I head privacy policy for Africa, Middle East, and Turkey. So the question you asked is a very interesting one. And we're having this conversation, on a panel that's speaking strictly, about human rights. But I don't know if this is going to be a disappointment, but my response or my answer is not necessarily going to be grounded entirely in human rights or only in human rights, because our approach to collecting, using, processing, and sharing data is really like more of a data protection kind of angle, which delves beyond human rights into things around consumer protection as well. And so, of course, what we have, like other entities, is our privacy policy. We call it a data policy, but it's essentially a privacy policy. So, our privacy policy is what shares with users how we collect, use, process, and share their data. hand in hand with this, I want to just flag that we have, and I'll talk about this, I think, a little later on in more detail. We have 7 key principles that we use to sort of share our overall approach to privacy or data protection at Meta. And one of those key principles is that we help people understand how their data is used. And that essentially means that we have a privacy policy that shares detailed information about this. So if you Google it, you don't have to necessarily even be on any of our social media platforms. You can just Google it and you find the Meta data policy, and it has like separate components that talk about what I've just mentioned. So we have a section that talks about what kind of information we collect, and we explain, and I'll try and outline a few of them. We explain that it's things that people do and provide on a platform. Things like information from our partners, device information as well. We also explain how the information is used, to provide personalized and improve our products, to provide measurement and analytics, to promote safety, integrity, and security. So this, of course, intersect with like core human rights issues. For example, verifying accounts, prevent unlawful access.
What the policies are regarding protection of data, and also how that affects human rights. So, and I think you raised an important point of using this data for research, and I think this begs the question of how this data are being protected across. Maybe we would like you to go deep into that, but then I will come back. I will allow you to rest for now. Let me go for read one, and I will come back for this. Yeah. So read one. Let's look at emerging trends that are coming up. Particularly, I'm interested in 2 of these emerging trends, which I found obvious. One of them is, and I believe they are highly connected to data protection and highly connected to human rights. So I will throw a question for you and Moyu, but we'll go with you first. If you look at these emerging trends, for example, look at the issue of loan sharks, normally known as loan sharks, that use the platform to collect people's data without, we don't even know their business. And secondly, they use this opportunity to do some inhuman things. For example, I'm sure at least one person received a message whereby a loan company sent a defamatory message about someone saying that someone is a chronic defaulter, he ran away with our money, things like that. And they will, if you're lucky, they might even say he's the sponsor of Boko Haram or something like that. Yeah, so it's quite possible. So, and also the second trend I want us to look, I'm trying that time to respond to that. And the second trend I'm looking at is the emergence of this digital identity companies that sell highly sensitive data to the highest bidder, be it government, be it private company. So the first question is, if you look at this trend, first I would like to know what loopholes are there that these companies are using to are exploiting to do this, to go about this with an unholy approach and trample on its human rights. That's one. And second, for you, Moyu, I would like to know what do you think about this coming from the angle of human rights? But I'll go with you first, Ridwan.
Yeah, I mean, first, it's recognizing the fact that in the grand scheme of things, when conversations like this, when we have pocket of conversations like this, the usual reaction is to, and I'm really careful now, but the usual reaction is to point direction at the bigger companies to say, oh, the bigger companies are responsible for the biggest violation. But in my experience doing research, I'll tell you for free, there are things smaller companies do that the big companies can't dare do at all. They can't dare venture into those spaces at all. They can't dare do it. And so I'm going to give some example. So in 2019, I think it was 2019, the New York Times broke out a story about a small company in the US called Clearview AI. This company is a facial networking company. That's what they call themselves. But basically, it's just a facial recognition company. And what they do is they scrap data available online, publicly, the one you posted on different social media platforms that you use. And as of 2019, this company had about 3 billion faces on its database. So let me give you context. The FBI, which is like probably one of the biggest law enforcement agencies in the world, has just about 500 million faces on its database. So for a private company to have about 3 billion faces, then that's a big problem. In 2021, when they were trying to raise money for some investment round, this company now currently boasts that they have about 10 billion faces on their database, which is there's certainty that if any one of you here use maybe a social media platform, they've likely scrapped your picture before and it's currently on their database. So this is a company, for example, who you can't hold accountable under the law we have here, even if there is a strength to it, and which operates freely. Again, I say this, the big companies that people tend to, and I'm not making a case for them, but I'm just giving a case that we shouldn't get distracted trying to chase some rabbit holes where there are actually bigger problems that day in, day out confronts us, but then they are not like the cynosure of everyone's eye. And they escape, the scrutiny that we tend to ascribe to the big companies. So this company has, and what they do basically is, these faces, they sell it to law enforcement agencies, which means I randomly pick up a face from maybe a CCTV footage, I run a scan, then it gives me, a whole lot of information about where you've been, the things you do, people you're associated with, and stuff like that. In the scheme of things, if you want to understand how dangerous this can be, you only need to know, what purpose is the law enforcement using it for? Is every law enforcement, are they actually fair? If you talk about some societies where racial profiling is a thing, religious profiling is a thing, it doesn't mean the same thing. And I'll give you context. This maybe it begins to make sense to us. So after the fall of the Afghanistan, government, the digital ID database of Afghanistan fell into the hand of Taliban, which means Taliban they have a digital identity base, which profile where people live, what they do, who they're associated with, who their family members are. So if you need to do anything, maybe to disappear, you can know them, you know where they live, you know who they're associated with. If you need to arrest people in lieu of them, maybe because they ran away, to force them to come back, you can easily do that. So I'm giving this background for us to get an idea of the size of what we are confronting. But that's a big part of the problem. To narrate, the digital ID conversation, a lot of digital ID companies, a lot of them are actually springing up these days, doing interesting fund rounds. And I don't think we're asking enough question, or even paying decent attention to what's going on in that space. It's easy for them to tell you, we've implemented these standards, we've done this, we've done that. But the first is, you build an API, people use it for authentication, basically confirm who you say you are who you say you are. And, all other purposes. But if you scrutinize these companies well, so last year I co-authored a book called the Fake AI Book. And part of what we looked at was some of the promises these companies made, especially when they say they leverage AI for identity management. So you see a company that says, a Nigerian company who boasts that, not just one actually, say they boast of facial recognition technology, and they already sell these technologies to some Nigerian-owned businesses too. So what you have is a whole lot of question when it comes to the use of AI. Bias,
a lot of arms that comes with it. We're not even sure what data they built these faces on. If you're extremely too dark, for example, maybe he's actually not even going to recognize your face. We don't know yet. No algorithm scrutiny, no algorithm assessment, not so much information even about the data protection impact assessment, or even a summary of it to understand, if all those safeguards were built into the product itself. Nothing. Everybody integrates and we'll just move on. So I'm just giving case studies or I'm giving examples. So if you now spin that conversation or we take a deep dive into digital lending, that's like a mess completely. I mean, they are responsible lenders, I have to say that. So because last year we put out the report where we looked at about 23 of them. Looked at them across 3 metrics: data protection, cybersecurity, and consumer protection. And while, if you look at everyone in this room, a decent number of us, our biggest pain points will be receiving message from these companies, whether telling you someone is dead or RIP. I really heard one of them actually put out an RIP because of someone who is actually owing. It's really crazy. Or whether they send you a message that the person has stolen and the person is on the run and the person has HIV to shame them, or that the person is a ritualist. I just heard that one last night. Moya was the one reading me say the person is a ritualist. Or because, of course, the social context here where, the government can decide not to do very well. And one day they can just throw in that moral spin. Say, for example, we want to regulate indecent dressing. And there's some section of the population that will be happy, forgetting the fact that these people have probably not done what they are meant to do in the first place. So the point I'm making is that moral thing that is so strong to the kind of society that we are. So when you say someone is a ritualist, I mean, you want to sit up very well. Say he's a ritualist, he uses children for rituals, for money rituals. Money rituals, but maybe the money rituals didn't work enough for the person to actually be owing your company. But point I'm making is that thing that you think is actually your biggest pain point is actually like a small pain point in the grand scheme of things. Because some of the things our research found was almost 30% of these companies that we looked at were actually using deceptive designs. And deceptive design is a situation where, you don't want to do something, but you're actually compelled to do it. You're manipulated to do it. So I'll give examples. You're trying to book an hotel, maybe using a flight aggregator, for example, to book, you want to travel, or maybe you're using an hotel and you need to, get the accommodation. They're telling you, 50 people check the same room. This room is hardly available, or something like there are 3 small seats available, there are 3 rooms available. It prompts urgency in you to pay. I don't know if anyone has actually been a victim of that, but nothing like that is happening. So, deception. Or is it when you want to purchase something, add something to it for you? And there are a whole lot of examples of deceptive designs. So for these people, what they did was, there's this thing they call positive comment as a service, where you hire companies and they make positive comment about your product in the Play Store, for example. So when you want to do, a lot of us want to you want to book an Airbnb, you first look at review. So when you see a nice review, you're tempted to download the app, right? So you see that a lot. So, and where we found the problem is, said, this app is really so amazing. They gave me $10,000 loan. We don't spend dollars as official currency in Nigeria. That's where you begin to see the problem. That the people dropping these comments are actually not here. Or you see them making reference to a currency of another country, or you just see bogus claim. Nobody lends anyone 10,000 USD on a mobile app asking for collateral. So you find deceptive patterns there. You find use of location data, and there's a whole big marketplace for location data. So, and I tell this story a lot, and I will tell you again. Everyone who's probably listened to me, I've probably heard this too many times, but it's just how big location data, how significant it is. So there's the American priest who was using this mobile app called Grindr network, or a dating app for this time around. So somehow the parish where he leads, they were able to get buy location data about this guy, where they find out that this guy was actually using they bought specific location data from the app Grindr itself, and they find out this person was actually meeting someone in a particular facility, which then led to his sacking. And here I will tell you to suspend your moral compass. If you turn that scenario around, it could mean something completely different. For those who are like Muslims, probably have heard about Muslim Pro. It's a popular app that a whole lot of Muslims used. This app itself was also selling data to local authorities. So in a world where you have things like profiling of people based on their faith, this means a lot. And I can go on talking about even apps like period tracking app that females use, all of these things. So location data actually means a lot, depending on what's being used. So you find use of location, I mean, a whole lot of collection of location data by these mobile apps, a whole lot to, these apps where your behavior, your thought, and this is it, let me give you a context. It's not just what you do on the app. These software development kits actually map also the things you do outside the app. Where do you spend time? What contents do you consume? What websites are you checking? What are the things that you like? So, if all of these things, again, I'll tell you, your biggest pain point is that somebody is sending you a message. But also, all of these things are actually going on in this space. And there's not enough scrutiny. I mean, but the reaction symptoms, just one of the symptoms, which is, the sending people messages and stuff like that, or even the excessive interest that they compare, or the excessive interest that they calculate to make more. And all of these things is for us to, don't chase. I mean, I won't say don't chase, but then don't lose, don't be distracted by a popular conversation to ignore even the smaller ones who are actually next door to us. So those are some of the problems, and those are things that we need to start paying attention to. The small companies, the small fintech company that you're signing up for, that amazing product that you're signing up for. So the thing, people tell you, read it. The truth is, as a researcher, I've seen so another amazing story I'll tell you from on their privacy notice. It takes you to exactly the same products, like exactly the same 3-paragraph privacy notice. 4 products. It leads exactly to the same place. So if someone is telling you, "Oh, read privacy notice," it's not helping you, because what if I put the privacy notice out there that it's not genuinely reflective of what I do? I've seen people adopt templates for privacy notices, and even the template generator, you see it just beneath it there. So what kind of companies are you dealing with? So again, on a user level or on an individual level, these are questions you need to ask yourself. These are conversations we need to have. So, and I think it's important. Maybe I'll get time to, talk about some other things, but I think it's important to just keep quiet at this point. Yeah.
All right. It's not.
All right. You can go on, Mo.
So I'll pick up from some of the things that Ridwan has mentioned, and just from the last things said, you realize that these issues are issues of regulatory and governance that, especially within our context in Nigeria, because what's going on is it's really indicative of the Nigerian problem, right? Which is that we exist as a country where we masquerade as if things are very okay, but the rule of law in this country essentially is that the bigger predator in the jungle is the person you fear next, and so we don't really have our act together as a country, and that's why we have these loan apps like they've both mentioned get away with a lot of the things that they get away with. Recently, the government announced that they will take action to work with, I think, Google to delist some of these apps from their Play Store, and that has happened. But there are still some of those apps that the government is unaware of. And what you find happening is that they've become creative now, especially with people who use Android devices, because I think iPhones have a level of security that Androids don't provide due to the fact that Androids are more open source. So what you have now is that some of these loan apps will reach out to you via WhatsApp, especially because they've built a repository of contacts and contacts of contacts just from gaining access to people's information, and send you messages saying you can install our app here, you can borrow this amount of money. Right? What they don't tell you is that at the due date, they would come knocking, and you start to get those type of defamatory messages that, quite honestly, like Ridwan rightly mentioned, some of these big companies they dare not try it. And I think that's where we need to start uh, placing focus on is the companies that are targeting the citizens at the bottom of the pyramid because it's strategic. I mean, perhaps not many of us in this room would have to borrow 3,000 naira or borrow 5,000 naira from a loan app. I mean, things get that desperate, then you probably reach out to a friend or some. But then the market seller or the student or somebody who doesn't have access to the kind of resources that people who are any anywhere on the spectrum of middle class to upper class who doesn't have access to these resources would see such loan apps as their their go-to when they're in need. And part of the problem is also that there is not an understanding of what data they are giving away. They don't understand that their data should be protected. They don't even understand what the data in itself is. And so we have a really big problem that requires it will take a couple of years for us to be able to address this effectively in terms of putting in place the mechanisms and putting in place the structures that are needed to essentially to stem the tide of what's happening in terms of carelessness with the data of citizens. Now, we're starting to see the use of terms that suggest that we are developing our digital selves. So, if you do research online, you would see the use of words like the metaverse, right, which is to suggest a virtual space. You'd see words like the netizens, which is to suggest citizens who use the internet, digital citizens essentially. And what that means is as we are developing our digital selves, as our lives start to take shape beyond the physical and exist in that plane of data and the internet and the digital space, there has to be very, very firm regulations to ensure that the same things that we enjoy in our physical lives as human beings, the same things that you enjoy as your fundamental human rights, can be translated to that space as well. And that's why at the moment there is still a lot of confusion globally about how to handle conversations online. So you're having debates about freedom of speech and whatnot. It's because at the moment technology is evolving so fast, so geometrically that what the issues we're dealing with today will be multiplied in 2 years, and then they'll be significantly greater in 10 years. So if we don't start putting these mechanisms in place, then we find ourselves dealing with serious problems. Now, as an human rights organization, one of the things that we're working to do as Global Rights is that we have been working we've been working with different sets of stakeholders, so whether government, private sector, civil society organizations, to ensure that we can develop resources that will help businesses understand the need to commit to the UNGP, and to commit to the NAPBHR. And some of these resources really are some of these resources. I'd like to say they're not getting the traction that they need to get at the moment, and that's because we've also had a hard time breaking into getting the private sector on board. So we've organized about 2 different business and human rights roundtables where we've been able to get businesses on board, but specifically fintechs, because it seems that's the new in thing in Nigeria. It's been difficult to get them on board, and these are the people that we need to get on board, especially because, for instance, we're having this conversation about data protection and privacy. If we get these people on board, we can start to have the right conversation about how do we, take on the responsibility of ensuring that these human rights are translated digitally as well. Because one thing that we cannot rely on is government regulation in Nigeria. There's no sector that you want to examine in the country where you can say there's effective regulation or oversight. There's none at all. And so the responsibility is then on, and that's why it's a lot of work that has to be done by the civil society and these private organizations to ensure that they take on that responsibility of protecting human rights within the digital space. So there's a lot to be said. It's not a conversation that stops here, but I think maybe as a country we're underestimating the importance of this conversation, because in a couple of years it's going to start to really tell on us when we're dealing with significant issues around breaches of privacy and the carelessness essentially with our data. And just to wrap things off, I'm not too versed with the tech language and with that space, but there was recently a news article about how someone, I think in the United States, was able to gain access to the information of Nigerians on the national identity management, essentially with about just $5,250. And so the question for me really is, how do you enforce regulations for private companies in terms of ensuring that they protect and they understand the sanctity of this data, when even the government itself does not seem to understand what it's handling and is careless with this very data? It's a huge problem, and I mean, I can't say that I have the solutions, but conversations like these and roundtables where we can have these conversations and really look at what solutions we can come up with are important moving forward.
Yeah, thank you very much, Moyo. I think what we do, the consensus we have right now is we all agree that look in terms of regulation and and the frameworks that are currently are in place. So let me quickly acknowledge the presence of the panelists I told you about in the first place, Mrs. Adejumoke Ajala, who is representing Association of Licensed Telecommunication Companies in Nigeria. She's the committee chairman, seminars and event. She's also the head of corporate affairs at Natcom Development and Investment Limited. Welcome, Ma. And let me just throw a quick one. So, I would like to know, what is the state of compliance in the telecommunication sector when it comes to digital rights, when it comes to human rights, and also data protection. We are running against time, so yeah.
Much. I totally apologize for coming late. I guess I was trying to schedule like meetings at the same time early in the morning. Talking about data rights, and thank you for inviting me here. I'm deeply honored to be here, representing my chairman, Engineer Benga Adebayo, and the whole of telco space, Alton. I will say thank you very much for inviting us to this big event. Um, with regards to data protection rights and privacy rights in telco space, we'll realize that NCC generally has a strict rule with regards to privacy. Your information and the information of consumers are protected. You're required to have security protection, firewalls, end-to-end protection, access controls with regards to access or security controls to your consumers' protection. But the major thing we have also, apart from consumer protection rights, which NCC has, which is the Nigerian Communications Commission, is to ensure that before anyone or any, even if it's a law enforcement organization wants to access the consumer's data, you need to obtain permission from the commission first. You need to the law enforcement agent has to be a certain cadre before we are allowed to release such security or such information for security reasons. Um, Also, another major thing is what NITDA has done. The NDPR actually provides for data controllers And with the data controllers in all telco spaces, you realize that those data controllers actually ensure that there's a data protection policy in each company. And with that, they're able to train people on data protection so that even those who have access to consumers' information are protected or are ensuring that those information are protected in a secured way. So indeed, people have ideas that maybe telcos go and distribute or send or sell their information to third parties. That information really it's incorrect. And even the information you're talking about access, I believe NIMSI that and said that was not possible and that was not true. And because it was a major concern to all telcos at that point in time. So indeed, with regards to telco space, your information is protected, and NCC has ensured and put measures, strict measures in place to ensure that that doesn't happen. Any breach as to that. I do agree that yes, there are some loopholes from here to there because we have very intelligent hackers, not only in Nigeria but also. But then we consistently and continuously.
Hello, doctor. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Want to diploma?
Yeah.
All right. So, in 2 minutes, doctor, can you walk us? Let's see what safeguards you have. Yes. User privacy. This is like a build-up on the initial question and also the point you raised regarding the research, using the data for research and activities like that. So, if you can do that in 2 minutes.
So I can't hear you.
Sorry.
You've been muted, so I can't hear you.
We are muted.
Now I can hear you. So please repeat. I didn't get anything you said.
Okay. Yeah, so I was saying building on the initial discussion we were having and also the point you raised regarding the usage of this data, let's say for research and relevant activity. I would like to know what safeguards you as a company have in protecting this data, maybe during transfers, if there is, and if it involves third party, what are the measures and what safeguards are in?
Thank you. So that is such a broad question and I think you said in 2 minutes.
Yes.
It is basically impossible for me to even scratch the surface in 2 minutes. So what I'll just try and share with you is our overarching approach. I mentioned earlier about our privacy principles. I can share that a little bit, like more in depth. So the first one the second one I had shared with you is about the privacy policy. Now we help people understand how their data is used, right? There are a couple of other ones that I can share that sort of sheds light on our approach. So the first one is that we give users control of their privacy. So essentially, we believe everyone should have the ability to make their own choices that are best for them. Because honestly, we found that privacy means different things for different people. So what we do is we empower people with the different controls and sort of help them understand how to adjust those controls and leave it to them to make the decisions around their privacy that makes the most sense to them. And so there's a lot of controls that we have. I could reel them off. We have the privacy checkup tool. We have, manage your information, download your information. There's a lot of tools that we have that people can use sort of control the data they share and how the data is used. The other key principle is that we work hard to keep information secure. So we are continuously working to protect users' accounts and also building security into every Facebook product that we build. And so our security systems are running, nonstop to catch and stop threats every second, literally. The other thing that I can mention that is close to or is related to data subject rights is that we of course recognize that every user owns and can delete their own information, right? So that means people can decide what to share with whom, and they can decide to change their mind after they've already shared information. Other principle is that improvement is constant, so we do not rest or sleep. We are always working to develop new controls. And the final one is that we are accountable. So we have a very comprehensive privacy review process. And so we ensure that we put our products to rigorous data security testing. And we also engage extensively with like external stakeholders, policymakers, privacy experts to help inform our data practices. In response to your question specifically about research, I wanted to say that we do not, so we do, process data for research purposes in a privacy protective way. So you will not find, data being shared that, contains personal information like, if it's for example, for COVID, the kind of COVID things we were doing, we wouldn't have data that has like the person's name and their email and other things that can identify them. So it's aggregated data that can then be used for research purposes. I don't know if that is 2 minutes and if that satisfies your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much for that. And well, I would like to apologize for we have used up time allocated question and answer. We still have 4 minutes. So I will open up the floor for questions before I come back to the panelists for 30 seconds. Yeah, sorry for that. So, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you, panelists, for a very incisive discussion. I want to ask, my name is Dan Lami Basharu. I'm Director, Anglo-Nigerian Welfare Association for the Blind, and a member of the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Now, I wanted to find out, how do I ensure that the human rights of persons with disabilities are clearly accounted for in the NAPBHR, that's the National Action Plan for Business and Human Rights? Thank you.
That's for you.
So I hope I can do this within 30 seconds. But yes, actually, both persons living with disabilities and vulnerable groups are two different groups that we're looking to ensure that are protected within the NAPBHR. And that's why the access to remedy bit is very important. And recent developments, especially on social media, have emphasized to us. In fact, we had a meeting at the office a couple of days back around ensuring that, digital privacy and protection rights for children and people living with disabilities. So that's something that will definitely be taken into consideration in the next roundtable for the business and human rights, but more so just to say that it's of particular importance rather within the context of access to remedies, especially because there already exist businesses within Nigeria that do not cater for vulnerable groups and people living with disabilities.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon. Okay, so I want to ask a question here to Dr. From the Meta. So it's quite interesting that when we were talking about the policies that you have, when you're talking about the policies that you have on for Meta, like on Facebook, you talk about the user's control, among other things. But I think that when we're talking about digital rights, it's deeper than the way we are seeing it in terms of if we really want to have this conversation about rights of citizens in Nigeria. I'll give you a practical example. I was working on a story. Somebody did a tweet on Twitter about something related to what she shared her experience about what she encountered. I had to DM this person for the access to actually use that particular tweet. Now, I could have just screenshot the tweet and put in my story. But when I contacted that person, she said, I tweeted it, but I don't want it to be on any news platform because I can change my mind to delete it at any point in time. That is what we're talking about digital rights here. Now, also the question of you having a user control. Now, I've read your policy. Your user control is giving me access to control what I'm posting on Facebook, so that if I don't want you to see what I'm posting, it restricts you from seeing it. I'm not protecting myself from the next person. I'm protecting myself from you, the owner of Facebook, the owner of Meta. So what is my protection from you? See, because as far as I'm concerned, personally, unless you have to educate me on it, for every social media, there's nothing free, basically. There's nothing free. I'm using Facebook at a cost. I am the product. My information is the product. So I go on Jumia to Google something on Jumia, and the next thing I'm seeing and heard about Jumia on my timeline. You get, what have you done with my data? That's what I'm talking about. I'm not protecting myself from the next person. I'm protecting myself from you. What are you using my data to do? So that's basically what I want to understand. Thank you.
Do I answer? Question is, how do you protect yourself from Meta itself? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, the question is a bit convoluted, and honestly, I cannot answer that in 30 minutes. So like I mentioned, we have a lot of controls that users can use to protect themselves or protect their personal information. But at the end of the day, people come to Facebook in particular to connect and engage with people across the world. So the assumption is that if you are on Facebook, you are there for that specific purpose. So the controls that we're going to provide to you will be related to what you're there for. The conversation about you go on Jumia and all those kind of things is something that honestly, I don't think we can talk about in 30 minutes. But the reality is that people engage online across. Can you still hear me? When I place the order, the code model that was. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, so I was saying people come on, go engage online across several platforms. And what happens is that oftentimes they engage in a lot of activities that are not always necessarily connected to Facebook. We hear all about cookies all the time. You engage, you go on a website that has to do with, let's say, traveling, and that, can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. That has to do with travel. And then there are cookies that have been placed on that website that then, will, for lack of a better word, follow you. And so it's not only on Facebook that you will see things that have to do with, what you're going to check. If you go to, I don't know, any other website, you will see that kind of information. So the issue, I think, is not really about Meta. The issue is about education and for people to understand. Like, the question I would ask is, do people read privacy policies? First of all, to understand exactly how whatever information they are sharing is going to be used. We need to educate ourselves and not put the blame all the time on companies that are engaging and providing services online. So in summary, that's what I'm going to say. It's the conversation is too deep to be able to give you a comprehensive answer. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Doctor. I would like to pick someone. It has to be a female so that we can balance, but I can't see any. Can we?
I'm here.
Okay, that's great.
Okay, I have a lot of questions, but I'll ask just one because of time. The speaker to your left spoke about deceptive designs used by aviation companies, airline companies, or even hotels. I just want to find out what exactly is wrong with that as far as digital or data rights is concerned. Or do you not see it as a marketing strategy?
Okay. Thanks. So there's a very thin line between responsible marketing and manipulating people to doing things that are in your favor as a brand. So I gave two examples of flight aggregators, hotel aggregators, where you get that notch. But it's not just, those are not just, if you look at whether it's Princeton, whether it's, there's a PDB guideline from, so there's a new guideline by Parent Data Protection Board, and that is open for comments. And I would really encourage you to take a look at that document itself. It has broader classification and more examples of deceptive patterns. So it's not just about, so it takes away your autonomy in the sense that you're literally, sometimes you're, so I'll give another example. So there's an advert that reads like, only people, something like suggests only people who are correct buy this kind of brand. If you can't afford it, then something like that. So it literally bullies people. So it's more about being able to manipulate people, more about being able to explore people's behavior, people's psychological states, then force them to make decisions that are in favor of the brand. So if you look at whether it's a favorable comment that are not genuinely reflective of people's experience of the brand, that gives some sort of succor for people to trust that brand, you're literally manipulating me into buying products when maybe genuine customers who have actually used the product are not even satisfied. Or whether it's a case of I buy something on your website, for example, and while checking out, you already attach something else to it for me that I didn't ask for. So deceptive patterns, a lot of them. But the central theme to it is, you can market responsibly without necessarily manipulating people into making decisions, especially when they are not genuinely reflective of quality or when you're misrepresenting the quality of your product or experience. It's a thin line between responsible marketing and manipulating people into making decisions like that.
All right, thank you very much. I can see so many hands, but we ran out of time. In fact, we have added 7 minutes already, and I would like to apologize for that. And that 30 seconds that I plan to give out, I'm sorry to the panelists, is not possible, but I will make a special case. You came late, Mrs. Adejumuki, so 30 seconds for you. Your last.
Thank you very much. I apologize again. And even just hearing the comments is really interesting. I wanted to say something even in relation to what said one of the people in the group said. Regards to your information and data privacy, I always suggest that when you go into any website or anything like that or any group, it's best you look at their privacy policies so that you're aware. Most of us don't even do that. We just overlook it and we accept the terms and conditions very easily. We just click just because we want to have access to that site, and then forget to realize that when you do that, that means you've given them access to your information, you've given them access to your privacy. So really, even in Nigeria, we really do not have such a robust data protection policy or rights or regulations, which is something I know um, a lot of people are gaining for. So I normally advise people that even when you do upgrades on your systems, on your phones and things like that, you're actually giving them more access. I know some people who deliberately would not even do upgrades because they're trying to limit the access they have. So when you do things like that, you go to your phones and limit permissions, as to what you really want to do. So that's my advice concerning it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I would like to thank our panelists, Mr. Ridwan. Thank you, and Mrs. Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Ajala and Moyo. Thanks for your time, and I would also like to. Oh, sorry, Doctor. Thank you very much for. You were hiding behind screen. That's why I but sorry
You
for
put me
that.
behind.
I
I'm
really
not
thank
happy.
you for thank you for giving us your time to have this conversation. And also I would like to thank you, the attendees that are here and also those that joined virtually. So with that, I am saying on to the next one. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Sunny. Before we leave, please, could you mind taking a group picture? Yes. The moderator and the panelists. We have just 30 seconds. Your time starts now.
Doctor should be included
Yes,
also.
she should.
Yes, so how do we do? Okay.